Hey, team players, welcome back. Today we're going to be breaking down the receivers that you want and the receivers that you need. And what makes local football flavor unique is that we end up doing a little bit differently in the way that we go about our math. Our math is all based upon what the market is looking for and what the actual bettors, what the actual experts are putting their money on from the sports books. Gajillion-dollar industry that knows what they're doing. And actually compiling the information from it makes a huge difference. So as we look at this and go, this is how we do the rankings. The next thing that we do and compile with our rankings that make us a little bit different is that instead of just going off the raw total, which is still important, we go off of where are you going to be each week. So I can get someone who will consistently produce and outproduce the competition around him. And that's how we come up with our tiers to create these lists here. And when you look at the back, or the receivers rather, there's a lot of talent here. And this list is not going to be consensus at all. Just to let you guys know that up front. And we start consensus, but yeah.
As we did in our running back episode, Joe, as another disclaimer is that while we might have players in certain positions in these tiers, we are suggesting to you that, yes, that player is in that tier. However, to use your draft board wisely. So you're going to hear a lot of players coming out in certain tiers, and you're like, well, should I draft them in the second round? Should I draft them in the third round? Certain players, no. We're not suggesting that. We are simply suggesting to use this draft board, use this data that we're giving you, and to play your boards accurately, right? And we'll get to situations as we read these rankings. So obviously, not really much to talk about here. CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill rule the roost, tier 1 for us here at Local Football Flavor. You're sitting there at the 2-3 pick. Hey, Nino, how's it going? We're talking about our wide receiver rankings today, so I'm glad you joined. CeeDee and Tyreek, obviously the second and third options coming off the board right away. There's no question. If you don't get CeeDee, take Tyreek. We're not going to talk about that. We know what we're getting out of these two players. The third player on our list, and who's in a tier on his own, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, you can use these rankings for best ball. You can also use these rankings for redraft leagues. Amon-Ra is our third best wide receiver on the board here. He is a model of consistency from a year-to-year basis, even consistency within the injury. So what we say about consistency is that he does not deviate much from his high week-to-week average. So when you're averaging 16, 17 points a game and your deviation is so tight to that, and you're either scoring 15 or you're scoring 15 to 20, that's a player that is going to be really reliable as the year goes on. You know, you can talk about JMO, whatever, but this offense is going to score. They're going to score. This is going to be a valuable player. If you're drafting at the 4-hole, 5-hole, whatever, Amon-Ra is there. Our next two players in the third tier is Debo and then A.J. Brown. Now, Joe and I, and this is the conversation piece that I was discussing, do we take Debo over A.J. Brown? No, we are not taking Debo over A.J. Brown. But how to use this ranking is this. If I know the ADP for A.J. Brown is a little bit higher and I want him on my team, I'm going to take him in the first round, on the back half of that first round where I can take him.
Yeah, ahead of Chase and J-Jeff.
But then it goes to Debo, right? And you say to yourself, well, where do I take Debo? Well, Debo would be that next round candidate for us. And even though we have them, you know, in that same tier, they're very close to one another from a positional week-to-week value. A.J. Brown for us is going to be your more consistent option, whereas Debo is going to be your threat to be a weekly 30-point, 25-point scorer. And it's going to be a very high variability there. Again, coming to this next part of the rankings, you haven't yet heard a couple of names. There's reasons why. These rankings, when we give them to you, they're baking in injury. We are baking in the current markets. These are markets as of today.
That's right.
From Vegas, right? We are pulling that all together. We are taking the injury information that we have, the situations of the quarterbacks and players, and you're going to hear a couple names that we haven't said yet. They have a chance to climb as the year goes on, of course. But again, Then the next tier, this fourth tier, surprise candidate, 2 of them right here in the fourth tier, with Keon Coleman and Brandon Ayuk. Again,
that's receiver 6 and 7, by the way,
Keon
overall.
Coleman is ranked as our 6th best wide receiver going into the year. But we are not taking him in the first round. We are not taking him in the second round. We are taking him at his ADP value with the potential to return, like we were saying, that 6th round option. You might say, well, Bob Joe, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy that Keon Coleman is your 6th best wide receiver. But if you look at it, it's really not. Josh Allen is capable of supporting a number 1 overall wide receiver.
Yes, he is.
He's done it in the past with Stephon Diggs. And Keon Coleman has the pedigree and the ability, although the separation is a cause for concern, but you're taking Keon Coleman in the 4th, 5th, 6th round.
He's the best receiver in that Buffalo room.
You don't need to worry about losing out value. Next tier. This is wide receivers 8 through 13 on our list. That's Evans, McConkey, Kupp, Jefferson, Smith, and Metcalf. One of the wide receivers that Joe and I have chased up the board a little bit, even with these rankings, is Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp has that potential flash to have an overall wide receiver, overall player number 1 total on a given game. So we like Cooper Kupp.
And there's very few receivers that can outscore Lamar.
And then, to be honest with you, Mike Evans is one of those players that year after year seems to be hovering around 1,000 yards, seems to get 7 to 11 touchdowns. And at value, he's good value in the 3rd round. And Darkside, you're absolutely true about that. But we'll see what Josh Allen's medal is made out of this year. If Josh Allen is projecting as QB1 overall, and we're projecting, 12 to 13 rushing touchdowns for Josh Allen, he's going to have to put it together through the air. And all of those touchdowns can't go to Dalton Kincaid. There's probably going to be 5 that go to Curtis Samuel. There's probably going to be 4 to 5 that go to Shakir, maybe 6. And so you're looking at a quarterback that statistically can pass for 25 touchdowns. You take 6 for Kincaid. You take 5 for Samuel. You take another 4 there for Shakir. That leaves a pretty good chunk for Dawson Knox, James Cook, and Keon Coleman. So
which Coleman's obviously going to get the most of.
So while it's a surprise, that is where we have him at in our rankings. And Devonta Smith and DK Metcalf, again, those are players that they have their quarterback situation is for Hurts. It's good. Devonta Smith we need to see more in terms of touchdown numbers. But if we draft Hurts, we're also probably targeting Smith or A.J. Brown as well. And when we look at Justin Jefferson as well, Justin Jefferson is here in this tier. He's going in the 1st round. And you're probably like, okay, why is he so low? Well, to the point that we made about Josh Allen is that Josh Allen is capable of supporting a 1,000-yard wide receiver. We don't know if Sam Darnold is going to be able to do that. We know that Justin Jefferson has the talent to be a 1,300, 1,400, 1,500, 1,600, 2,000-yard receiver. But will Sam Darnold get you there? And in my personal opinion, looking at my rankings, I would rather have Amon-Ra. I would rather have A.J. Brown, a more consistent, a more credible threat for that 30 points with a good enough quarterback over Justin Jefferson. So that's kind of where we're sitting at on that fence, is that we're not suggesting to you that, you shouldn't take Justin Jefferson. But what we are saying is that there's
much better options where you'd have to pay the price for JJ, though.
There's a better option for you, even if you go.
So in a way, we really are saying you shouldn't be drafting Justin Jefferson, or you shouldn't be drafting JJ or the next receiver on our list. You shouldn't be drafting either JJ or Chase, because there's so many better options for the top 5 picks in your draft.
So this is the next tier that we have. Again, using this information in combination.
And again, Chase is a tier break below Metcalf. That needs to be said.
This is again to combine with your ADP. So this is our 6th tier right here. And, with this tier,
it's a big one.
Paul, he can produce with a guy like Mullins, but and the numbers bake into this. Injuries are baked in. The ability of Minnesota to score is also baked in.
That's the bigger issue. The markets don't believe Minnesota's going to score enough.
And Joe, this is not to say that Justin Jefferson can't score with any other quarterback.
Yeah, no, it's not saying that at all.
This is more of an indictment on Sam Darnold than it is on Justin Jefferson. This is more against
and in general, the expectation of what the Vikings as a team are going to produce. This is the same thing that with Atlanta that we keep talking about as well. Just because ESPN loves them doesn't mean the betting markets do.
And I want to suggest this too for anybody who wants Justin Jefferson to draft, is that when we look at players like Debo or AJ Brown at the back half of the round 1, beginning of round 2, you look at players that just as likely have the capability with a better situation to score the same amount of points or better than Jefferson on a week-to-week basis. So that needs to be considered as you make your decisions, right? Here's the next tier. You're going to notice a lot of popular names in this tier. We're going to tell you why they're in this tier after I read the tier. You have Chase, then Waddle, then Flowers, then Adams, then Myers, then Nakua, then Jaden Reed, then Garrett Wilson, then Brandon Cooks, Brian Thomas, Michael Pittman, Drake London. Huge tier right there. Now, how I would use this information. How do you use this information? Well, we see that Jacoby Myers is ranked as our wide receiver 18 on the year. And you say, well, do I draft him in the first, second, third round? No. You draft Jacoby Myers at his value in the 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th rounds. When he returns that value, he can return wide receiver 18 value.
Which can win you a league.
Given that situation. And looking at this number, the reason these two Raiders wide receivers are in this tier isn't because they are bad players. None of these players are bad players that we're mentioning right now to you. But what we are suggesting is that their situations are definitely interesting, is that Oakland in a second year with Antonio Pierce, we're curious about what's going to happen with that room. The running back room is very unsettled, although Zamir White could take a step. This could end up being Madison 2.0. They also have the regular Madison. So the reason they're in this tier is because we're expecting, and the markets are expecting, this team to pass a lot. And you'll notice that Gardner Minshew was lower down in our ranking. And you're saying, well, shouldn't he be a little bit higher? Well, yes, for us, he's never gotten over 15 touchdowns in a year, right? Offers a little bit of rushing upside. And we'll get to your question, Nino.
Well, Nino, we'll get to that during our draft in the show.
Little bit of rushing upside. And so you got to consider all that in there too. The biggest names in here is Garrett Wilson, Puka, and Chase. And you're saying, well, why are they this low? Well, Puka's down here. Puka would be in the top 4 tiers for us if he wasn't injured right now. You look at the numbers, and this injury could linger, right?
Yes.
The math, the markets are saying that this injury is going to linger. And so currently, that is why Puka is ranked this low. Again, Jamar Chase is ranked this low because of the contract situation and the Joe Burrow injury and the situation in general with the Bengals. So will next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, could Jamar Chase jump up into that 3rd, 4th tier? Absolutely. That can happen. But currently, right now, at market value, it is not necessarily recommended to take Jamar when you have a definitely better option in terms of stability with Amon-Ra on the board and a better option in terms of stability with A.J. Brown. Could Jamar Chase throw up a 40-point week? Absolutely. It's almost guaranteed that he could do it with a healthy Joe Burrow. But you got to consider that. Again, going to Garrett Wilson. If we're sitting at that turn and we're looking at all the players available to us at that turn, A.J. Brown is one of the players that we really like. We also like Cooper Kupp. We're taking Cooper Kupp more than we're taking Garrett Wilson. We're not denying that Garrett Wilson is a talent, but the questions are already there. The questions are already there. And one of the biggest questions is volume. Last year, he was peppered absolutely peppered by the trash quarterbacks that were throwing him the ball last year. And we are simply positing, most creators are positing that target volume is going to stay the same. But you have to remember that the wide receivers were also not very good last year. They went out, got a Mike Williams who could be healthy this year. They went out, they have a rookie wide receiver, and they have an aging Aaron Rodgers, who's an MVP, a past MVP, and a Hall of Famer. If we get the Aaron Rodgers that was 4 or 5 years ago when healthy, Garrett Wilson is definitely worth a pick. However, that is not guaranteed. And based upon what we saw of Aaron Rodgers prior to the injury, there's a good chance that Garrett Wilson won't return value. And many content creators are telling you that he will. He's a great pick at the end of that round. There's a good chance that he won't. And I would rather have a Cooper Kupp, a Deebo Samuel, who I know definitely have that chance to spike 30 points, definitely have that chance to spike 20 points. And Garrett Wilson needs to up that average a little bit. So maybe not this year, but maybe next year he's going to climb up higher.
And maybe next year he'll be there, but this year it's absolutely not.
The next tier after that, and this will take us to wide receiver 32 before we
and it'll conclude the show here. So we only got about 2 minutes left.
Before we jump into our draft. So Nino, join us in the draft. We'll answer your question in the draft here. I definitely want to get to that. But our last tier, 30 up until from wide receiver 26 to 32. This isn't the last overall tier, but it is.
So last year we're doing our top 32 though.
Yeah. In this tier, we have Nico, T, Terry McLaurin, Tyler Lockett, Christian Watson, Chris Olave, Christian Kirk. I'm a big Terry McLaurin guy. If I'm planning on building Jane Daniels in best ball, I'm taking Terry McLaurin almost all the time in round 5, in round 6. His value is there. You know, we have him ranked as our wide receiver 28. And that is for that. The reason that is because the markets are telling us that Washington's probably going to have a harder time scoring on the year. And with a rookie quarterback, we aren't sure what that rookie quarterback is going to do for this rookie or for the wide receiver room. I could see Terry McLaurin normalizing into that 800 to 1100 range with 5 to 8 touchdowns, which is pretty good where his market value is right now. Again, T. Higgins is dinged because of the Joe Burrow injury. Also dinged because, you know, those rushing numbers will be able to climb. And Nico is the first. You'll notice he's the first Houston wide receiver on this board. And, I'd be willing to take the risk on a guy like Nico because I like him a lot. But at value, we're seeing better value with a guy like Kupp, with a guy like Deebo, even if you want to take a chance on Drake London over Deebo. But honestly, statistically speaking, what we're probably doing in the second round, if we have that chance to take Nico, is we're probably shooting for Kyron, who is higher on our rankings overall.
And that's right.
Shooting for Deebo, who's higher on our rankings overall. So that's something to consider as you use these rankings. And join us right now. We're going to be jumping.
About to start a live draft, and we're going to the 4th pick overall. We're ready for you guys.
So Nino, post that question in our live draft when we get to it.